Hey everyone, and welcome to a deep dive that I think you're going to find really fascinating. We're going to be taking a look at Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power.
A book that I know you've heard of.
It's definitely a controversial one.
Yeah.
We are going straight to the source material. We're going to be reading excerpts from the book itself and really trying to understand the core concepts of these laws.
Yeah, this is a book that people seem to either really love or they're completely turned off by it.
It's true. But whether you love it or you hate it, there's no doubt that it's full of all of these different power plays, and that these laws have been used successfully for centuries.
Absolutely.
And really, our goal here today is to kind of crack the code of these 48 laws, not necessarily to endorse every single one of them,
Right.
but to understand them, because knowledge is power, right?
Absolutely. It's like understanding the rules of the game.
Yeah.
You may decide not to play the game that way, but at least you know how it's played.
Exactly. So we're going to pull out the most intriguing examples, the ones that really make these laws stick in your mind. And we're going to think about how it applies to our lives. Have you ever seen someone kind of effortlessly float to the top? Or maybe you felt like someone was pulling strings behind the scenes?
Right.
We're going to unpack all of that.
Yeah, and look at how these laws play out in the real world, too. Everything from boardrooms to historical power struggles.
Oh, and get ready for some eyebrow-raising moments.
Yeah.
Greene does not shy away from the ruthless stuff. We're talking laws like never outshine the master, use enemies to your advantage, even play dumb to win.
Oh, yeah.
Buckle up, because this is about to get interesting.
It is. But before we dive into the specifics of the 48 laws themselves, let's take a quick look at the concept of power dynamics.
Okay, so this power dynamics thing, it
Yeah.
feels like something that we all experience, but maybe we don't always recognize it.
Exactly. Think of it as the invisible currents that shape all of our interactions. So who has the ability to get what they want, even when others resist? It's not always obvious. It can stem from knowledge, it can stem from reputation, social connections, all sorts of things.
So it's not just about being the loudest voice in the room.
No, not at all.
It's about understanding those more subtle levers of influence.
Precisely, and that's where Greene's 48 laws come into play. He's essentially created a playbook of power tactics, drawing on examples from history. You see figures like Machiavelli in there, Queen Elizabeth I, even P.T. Barnum.
Wow. That's quite a range.
It is.
So instead of going through all 48 laws one by one, which I think would be a little bit tedious, we're going to group them thematically.
Right.
Kind of like creating a cheat sheet for understanding power dynamics.
Exactly, and thinking about them in these clusters can really help to see the bigger picture.
Okay.
So let's start with a group of laws that deal with appearance and perception,
Okay.
really how you present yourself to the world, the image you project.
Okay, so first impressions really do matter,
Oh, absolutely.
even when it comes to power.
Take Law 1. Never outshine the master.
Don't make your boss look bad.
Right.
I feel like I've seen that backfire a few times.
Oh, many times. But Greene actually highlights Louis XIV, the Sun King, as someone who mastered this. He surrounded himself with brilliant artists, intellectuals, but was always careful to be the center of attention.
So even if you're incredibly talented, knowing when to kind of dial it back can actually be a power move.
It can.
That's kind of counterintuitive.
It is. It's about understanding that power often thrives on perception.
Yeah.
And sometimes a bit of strategic self-effacement can go a long way.
It's like you're playing 4D chess with people's perceptions of you.
Exactly. Now, think about Law 4. Say less than necessary. Greene argues that creating an aura of mystery can make people crave more.
Okay, so less is more.
Yes.
I like it. It makes you sound like you've got secrets.
Exactly. It piques people's curiosity, leaves them wanting to know more.
Yeah.
Have you noticed how some people just seem to command attention just by being a little reserved?
Oh, totally. They make every word count. But wait, doesn't that clash with Law 6? Court attention at all costs.
It might seem that way at first glance.
Yeah.
But think about figures like P.T. Barnum, the master showman. He understood the power of spectacle, of creating a buzz, drawing people in.
So it's not always about blending in. Sometimes that calculated, display of boldness can be the power move.
Exactly. It's about reading the situation, knowing when to play up your strengths.
Okay.
It all goes down to understanding your audience and tailoring your approach.
Okay. So we've got strategic silence and knowing when to stand out. What else falls under this appearance and perception umbrella?
Well, Law 30, make your accomplishments seem effortless, is a fascinating one.
Ooh, like you were born to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, people love that.
They do. It's about cultivating an image of effortless success.
Yeah.
And Green uses Steve Jobs as an example of this, presenting each new Apple product as if it appeared through magic.
I can see why that's so effective.
Yeah.
People are really drawn to people who make things look easy, like they have some secret formula.
Exactly. But what's interesting is that often this perception of effortlessness actually takes a lot of work behind the scenes.
Right.
It's about carefully controlling the narrative that people see.
So the key takeaway here is that how you're perceived is just as important as what you actually accomplish.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to these laws.
This is really getting me thinking about all those subtle power dynamics that I've witnessed in my own life without even realizing it. But let's move on to another cluster of laws.
Yeah.
What about those laws that deal with navigating relationships? I have a feeling this is where things get really juicy.
Oh, you are absolutely right. This is where Green dives into some seriously counterintuitive strategies.
Okay.
For instance, Law 2. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies.
Okay, that one sounds brutal. I mean, who wants to use their enemies?
It does sound a bit harsh, I agree. But Green's argument is that enemies can often be more motivated to prove their loyalty. They work harder to earn your trust.
So the idea is that former enemies, they kind of have something to prove, whereas friends, they might take that trust for granted.
Precisely. And Green backs this up with some compelling historical examples.
Okay.
One he highlights is the relationship between Abraham Lincoln and Edwin Stanton. Stanton was initially a fierce critic of Lincoln's.
Really? And Lincoln brought him onto his team.
He did.
What was he thinking?
Well, Lincoln recognized Stanton's talents and actually saw his criticisms as a sign of passion.
Okay.
So he appointed Stanton Secretary of War,
Wow.
and Stanton ended up becoming one of his most trusted advisors.
So sometimes bringing a former adversary into the fold can actually be a brilliant move.
It can.
It's like turning their opposition into an asset.
Exactly. And it speaks to the importance of being able to see beyond personal animosity and recognizing talent, even in those who have opposed you.
Okay. I'm starting to see how these laws can be surprisingly complex. So use enemies. That's just the beginning.
Right.
What other relationship strategies does Green propose?
Well, there's Law 7. Get others to do the work for you, but always take the credit.
Ah, delegation with a Machiavellian twist.
A little bit, yeah.
Isn't that a bit unethical?
It can be, certainly depending on how it's applied. But the principle itself is about leveraging other people's skills and efforts to achieve your goals.
So it's about being a strategic leader, assembling a team that can really execute your vision.
Exactly. But the key, according to Green, is to ensure that you're the one who receives the recognition for those accomplishments, which, let's be honest, happens quite often in the real world.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that play out, in the workplace. But what about Law 11, keep people dependent on you? That one sounds like it could easily cross the line.
It absolutely can. This law is all about cultivating a sense of indispensability. You become the go-to person, the one with the unique knowledge or skills that others rely on.
So you're strategically positioning yourself as the holder of valuable information or resources.
Precisely. It could be something as simple as being the only one who knows how to fix the printer, or as complex as controlling the flow of information within a company.
Okay, so we've got use enemies, delegate strategically, and be indispensable. Any other relationship laws in this cluster that are particularly striking?
Oh, there are a couple more that are worth exploring. Let's take a look at Law 14.
All right, bring it on. I'm ready for more of Green's counterintuitive wisdom. What's Law 14?
Welcome back. I hope you've had a chance to really let those first few laws sink in.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
They really challenge our conventional thinking about power, don't they?
They do. It's like Green is showing us these sort of like hidden mechanics behind human interactions.
Yeah.
And we've only just scratched the surface, and I'm already starting to see these power plays everywhere I look.
Exactly. And that awareness is key. So, ready to dive into some more of these intriguing laws?
Absolutely. Bring on the wisdom, even if it's a little bit ruthless. What's up next on our list?
Well, we left off talking about those strategic relationships. Law 14, pose as a friend, work as a spy.
Ooh, that one sounds straight out of a spy thriller.
Right.
Are we talking about actual espionage here?
Not necessarily. It's more about the importance of gathering intelligence
Okay.
and understanding the people that you're dealing with, even those that you consider allies.
So it's about being observant, picking up on those subtle cues that people give off, maybe even reading between the lines a bit.
Precisely. It's about being aware of unspoken motives, understanding those dynamics that are at play beneath the surface. Knowledge, especially about your rivals, is a huge advantage.
It's like you're always one step ahead, anticipating their moves.
Exactly. Now, this next law is interesting because it seems to advocate for detachment. Law 20, don't commit to anyone.
Wait, not commit to anyone? That sounds like a recipe for loneliness. How can that possibly be a power move?
Well, Green's argument is that aligning yourself too closely with any one person or group can limit your options, make you vulnerable.
So it's about maintaining a certain level of autonomy, not becoming beholden to anyone.
Precisely. Staying flexible, keeping your options open, being able to shift alliances if needed. It's a very strategic approach to relationships.
Okay, I'm starting to see the logic here, even if it feels a bit cold. But haven't we been talking about strategic relationships this whole time? This seems to kind of contradict that.
It's about finding a balance.
Okay.
You can cultivate strong relationships without becoming entirely dependent on any one person or group.
Right.
It's about having a diverse network and be able to navigate those different social circles with ease.
So it's like a delicate dance?
It is.
Building trust while also maintaining your independence.
Exactly. A high-wire act, but one that can be mastered with practice. Now, speaking of delicate dances, let's shift gears a little bit and explore a cluster of laws that delve into the more, shall we say, ethically ambiguous tactics.
Ooh. I was wondering when we'd get to those. The ones that kind of make you feel a little uneasy, but also strangely fascinated at the same time.
Yes.
I'm ready to see what Green has to say about that darker side of power.
Well, let's start with a classic. Law 3, conceal your intentions.
Keep your cards close to the vest.
Yes!
I can see how that would be useful in negotiations or any kind of competitive situation.
Absolutely. It's about keeping your opponents guessing, not revealing your true motives until the time is right. Prevents them from anticipating your moves or planning counter strategies.
Makes sense, but doesn't that create a lack of transparency? How do you build trust if you're constantly hiding your intentions?
It is a balancing act for sure. But remember, these laws are about understanding power dynamics, not necessarily endorsing every single tactic. In some situations, a degree of secrecy can be strategic.
Okay, point taken. What's next on our list of ethically questionable power moves?
Let's take a look at Law 21. Play a sucker to catch a sucker. Seem dumber than your mark. This one's all about using deception to gain an advantage.
Play a sucker. Does that mean pretending to be less intelligent or capable than you actually are?
Exactly.
Why would anyone do that?
The idea is to lull your opponent into a false sense of security. They underestimate you.
Right.
Which can give you that tactical advantage.
So you're playing dumb to win.
Yes.
That seems pretty sneaky. Are there any historical figures who used this tactic effectively?
Oh, certainly. Otto von Bismarck, the Prussian statesman, was known for this. He often feigned ignorance or confusion just to get his opponents to reveal their true intentions.
Wow, so sometimes playing the fool can actually be a power move. Who knew?
You see it all the time.
What other laws fall under this manipulation and deception theme?
Well, Law 32, play to people's fantasies, is a fascinating one. This is all about tapping into those deep desires and aspirations that people have.
So it's about promising them something they really want, even if you can't necessarily deliver.
It can be. Think about advertising. They often sell you a fantasy, a lifestyle, rather than just a product.
Right, or even political campaigns. Yeah. They often tap into people's hopes and fears to try to gain support.
Precisely. It's about understanding what people crave and then presenting yourself or your ideas as the key to fulfilling those desires.
Okay, so we've got conceding intentions, playing dumb, and tapping into fantasies. What else does Green have in store for us in this ethically ambiguous category?
Law 39, stir up waters to catch fish. It's a bit like the whole divide and conquer strategy.
So you sow discord among your opponents, making them weaker and easier to control.
That's the idea.
That sounds pretty Machiavellian.
It can be. But it's also a tactic that's been used throughout history. You see it often in political maneuvering, warfare. The idea that a united front is much harder to overcome than a fractured one.
I can see how that would be effective, but it also seems like kind of a risky strategy. What if that chaos you create backfires?
It's definitely a high-stakes game, and that's why Green emphasizes the importance of careful planning and understanding the potential consequences of your actions.
So it's not just about creating chaos for the sake of it.
Right.
It's about strategically using disruption to your advantage.
Exactly. Now, speaking of disruption, let's take a look at Law 44. Disarm and infuriate with the mirror effect.
The mirror effect. What does that mean?
It's about reflecting back your opponent's behavior, their words, their actions, showing them their own flaws and inconsistencies.
So if someone's being aggressive, you mirror that aggression back at them.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
It's more about subtly highlighting those contradictions,
Right.
making them question their own behavior. It can be incredibly disarming because it forces them to confront their own shortcomings.
I can see how that could be effective, but it also seems like it requires a certain level of finesse. You have to be careful not to come across as simply mocking or antagonizing them.
Absolutely. It requires a certain level of emotional intelligence and the ability to really read people accurately,
Right.
understand their motivations, anticipate their reactions.
It's kind of reminding me of that saying, it takes one to know one. Like, you have to understand these tactics on a very deep level to be able to use them effectively and ethically.
Exactly. And that awareness is key. Now, ready to move on to some laws that are a bit less about manipulation and more about self-mastery.
Definitely. I'm curious to see what Green has to say about developing, your own inner strength and strategic thinking. Those seem like really essential qualities for anyone, whether they're aiming for like the corner office or just want to, navigate life's challenges more effectively.
Great. Let's dive into Law 9.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the 48 Laws of Power. We've covered a lot of ground, from subtle influence tactics to some pretty ruthless power plays.
We definitely explored both ends of the spectrum.
And as promised, it's time to kind of zoom out a little bit and look at the bigger picture.
Right.
We've talked a lot about how these laws can be used strategically, but I think it's also important to acknowledge, some of the criticisms of Green's work.
Of course.
It's not all sunshine and roses, right?
You're right. One of the main criticisms is that this book can actually foster a sense of paranoia and mistrust.
Yeah.
If everyone is constantly scheming and trying to manipulate each other, how can we ever really trust anyone?
It's like you're always looking over your shoulder wondering who's trying to play you.
Right.
It doesn't exactly create a very collaborative or supportive environment.
And critics also point out that this book can encourage a manipulative mindset, even if you're not consciously using these tactics.
Right.
It can make you more cynical and less inclined to see the good in people.
So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes.
If you believe everyone is out to get you, you might start acting in ways that make that belief come true.
Exactly. And that brings us to a really crucial question.
Okay.
Can you apply these principles ethically?
Right.
Can you understand and even use these power dynamics without becoming a master manipulator?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
I mean, Green himself says that these laws are amoral, like the laws of physics.
Right.
They can be used for good or for ill.
It's exactly. It all comes down to the user's intent and their own moral compass.
So it's not about throwing your ethics out the window.
No.
It's about being aware of these power dynamics and then using that knowledge wisely.
Precisely. And I think the key to ethical application lies in a shift in perspective.
Okay.
Instead of seeing these laws as tools for domination, think of them as ways to understand human behavior.
So instead of crush your enemy,
Right.
totally,
Right.
you could use that understanding of power dynamics to maybe de-escalate a conflict or find a win-win solution.
Exactly. Or take play to people's fantasies.
Yeah.
Instead of exploiting those desires, you could use that understanding to inspire people to create a shared vision that motivates them to achieve something positive.
It's like channeling those insights into something constructive, something that benefits everyone involved. But that takes self-awareness, right?
Absolutely. You have to constantly check your own motives, your own use of power.
Mm-hmm.
Are you acting from a place of integrity, or are you trying to manipulate people just for your own gain?
Okay, so self-reflection is crucial. But what are some tangible takeaways for our listeners?
Sure.
What can they actually do with this knowledge?
Well, first, I would say become an observer. Start noticing these power dynamics in your own life, in your workplace, in your relationships, even in those seemingly mundane, everyday interactions.
Like, who holds the influence in a conversation? Who's trying to control the narrative? Who's subtly asserting their dominance?
Exactly. Once you start to see these patterns, you can't unsee them.
It's like you've developed this whole new lens for understanding human interactions.
It is.
It's like having X-ray vision for social dynamics.
I like that.
Okay, so become an observer. What else?
Second, be strategic.
Yeah.
Even if you're not aiming for the top of the corporate ladder or trying to become some political mastermind,
Right.
understanding these laws can help you make smarter decisions and communicate more effectively.
Like knowing when to hold back, when to assert yourself, when to build alliances, and when to walk away from a situation that's not serving you.
Exactly. It's about navigating this game of power intelligently, even if you're not trying to win at all costs.
And finally, the most important takeaway, be ethical.
Yes, use this knowledge to empower yourself and others, not to manipulate or exploit anyone. Remember, power is a tool it can build or it can destroy.
It's up to each of us to decide how we want to wield it.
And keep in mind, Green only outlined 48 laws. You might discover your own principles for navigating these power dynamics in a way that aligns with your values.
That's a great point. Maybe there's a whole other set of ethical power laws out there just waiting to be defined.
Perhaps that's something for our listeners to ponder.
Ooh, I like that.
What are your own guiding principles? How do you want to navigate power in your life?
That's a great question to leave our listeners with. It's not just about memorizing these 48 laws.
But
It's about sparking that self-reflection, that deeper understanding of how power really works in the world and how we each choose to engage with it.
Well said.
So, until next time, keep those minds sharp and those intentions noble.
And remember, even as you play the game, never stop questioning the rules.